Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to everybody around the world for joining in this event. This was a vision just about a year ago, and it's just fantastic to see it coming to life, and it's been a brilliant morning so far going through it. I get the real privilege in this part of the session to talk to somebody who truly embodies what being global and being a global leader is all about. And not only that, she was part of the Forbes' most powerful women in business list for the world, which is pretty much a great feat to be. Indra Nooyi began her career at PepsiCo more than 20 years ago. And in that time, she's been a force behind the growth, the diversification and acquisitions that they've made. She is quite remarkable in what she does. We as a company are incredibly proud to be in partnership with her business, but also to have such a good relationship with her. One of the things that she did when she became CEO in 2006 is she introduced something called performance with purpose. And one of the really important things about that is that not only was it about the business overall, but it also said that diversity and inclusion had to be something that was open and available to all employees, no matter where they worked. So please put your hands together and help me welcome Indra Nooyi, CEO and Chairman of PepsiCo. Please have a seat. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today.
Pleasure.
I know you have a very busy schedule and we really appreciate it. I'd like to start by asking you a little bit about this performance with purpose and sort of how that concept came into being and what role diversity and talent played within that for you and for the organization.
First of all, thank you for having me, Judith. It's a real privilege to be here at Wal-mart and be with all of you. When I became CEO in 2006, and my boss before that is here. Where's Steve Reinemann? Steve, can you stand so people can see you here? Steve Reinemann. I want to say the amazing Steve Reinemann, but I'll come to Steve Reinemann in just a while so that I can embarrass him as we go along. It works. He's your board member. Don't worry about that. I'm doing the embarrassing. I think at that time, in 2006, it became amply clear that businesses not only had to make money and perform, but they also had to have a core, a purpose. And in many companies that I was watching around the world, their purpose was defined by a corporate social responsibility program, which is really saying, we're going to make money, and then we're going to spend the money by doing some projects. I thought we should change the dialogue and say, what if we made money differently? Not spend the money in a way, but actually made money differently. And so performance with purpose was recasting how we made money. And there were 3 planks to purpose. Performance is performance, of course. Yeah. The 3 planks to purpose were, the first one is sort of human sustainability. How do we transform our portfolio so that we can have a balanced range of products from sort of fun for you to good for you? So how do we emphasize the Quaker Oats and the Tropicana and the Naked Juice? I see some of you drinking Naked Juice. How do we emphasize that as much as we do Pepsi and Lay's and Doritos? Because there's a place for everything in people's lives. So that was the first part of the purpose plank. The second is environmental sustainability. And I know that Wal-mart and us share the same goals on environmental sustainability. To use less plastic, to use less water, to reduce the carbon footprint, I think is good for society. It gives you a license to operate in many communities, but it saves you money. So it made good business sense. And the third was really the most important plank, which was talent sustainability. How do we make sure we create an environment in PepsiCo where everybody can bring their whole selves to work? And how do we move the ball forward to make sure that our employee base reflects our consumer base? And how do we create an environment where nobody felt discriminated against, where nobody felt like they had to be somebody else in PepsiCo? It's not easy to do that because you've got to change so many things about the company. But this was a journey we started some time ago. We decided to accelerate the journey. And those were the 3 parts of performance with purpose. And the amazing thing, Judith, is that articulating performance with purpose has unleashed the passions of everybody in PepsiCo. Because people feel a sense of emotional connection to the company. When they talk about PepsiCo to the outside world, they not just talk about this high-performance company, they talk about how we are changing the portfolio for the future needs of consumers worldwide, how we're doing the right thing for communities, and how they're so proud to work in PepsiCo because they can be a daughter, a mother, a wife, a daughter-in-law, whatever, within PepsiCo as they are when they leave PepsiCo. So it's been, sort of uplifting for the whole company, if you want to call it that.
I love the way that you can articulate it so simply. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons why it's resonated with everybody. And this concept of talent sustainability, I think, is a great phrase in it. You're obviously really passionate about it. And if you look at this whole talent thing and apply it to your career, phenomenally successful career, what are some of the challenges along the way that you faced, particularly spotlight of being a woman within this? And kind of how are you helping to level that within the organization?
That's a great question. And I tell you, I want to contrast a bit the time that I came into the workforce, long, long time ago, versus women coming to the workforce today. Because I think we're really looking at two different time frames and two different environments. Yeah. I go back and I first started work here in the United States in 1980. And when I went to work at the Boston Consulting Group, there were hardly any women there. And when you got staffed on a case, the guys got to pick all the fun parts of the assignment, and you got left the dregs. So it was tough because if you were doing a case, I was working out of the Chicago office. I mean, I loved the firm, don't get me wrong, but the environment was such. If the case was for a client that had headquarters in Chicago, and they had manufacturing in Waterloo, Iowa, no-name Wisconsin, whatever, the guys got all the Chicago assignments, and I was commuting to all these little towns. Yeah. But at that point, you didn't have a choice. You're only one of two women in the firm or in the Chicago office. And that's the environment. So you put up with it. And I'd say in those days, us women worked much harder than the men to really be noticed. I'd often say that if the men started on an even keel, we started in the hole, 20, 30% in the hole. So step one, we had to dig ourselves out of the hole. And then even when you got to even keel, for every step that you took, it was counted as half a step. Yeah. For every step that the men took, it was counted as 2 steps. So it was a disaster, okay? But that was old times. And the other thing that used to happen is I remember a couple of partners, when they talk to me, they never give me eye contact. It's most disconcerting when the guys get the eye contact and the women didn't. Now, I'm not male bashing, don't get me wrong. I'm just giving you a realistic story of life those days, okay? Life those days. And I think it's important you understand how different the environment is today because we're all working to make it different. Fast forward today. I think even a firm like BCG has got a lot of women, and that sort of behavior you'll never see in that firm today. But over time, as I moved through Motorola, Asia Brown Boveri, and then came to PepsiCo, I think the environment changed. For one, more women coming into the workforce, which is a good thing. I think two, companies are now beginning to realize that if 50% of the graduating students in colleges are women, if a large portion of the technical professional degrees are being gotten by women, and if all the top grades in colleges are being gotten by women, how can you run a successful enterprise unless you attract the best and the brightest? It happens to be a lot of the women. So if you really want to have a successful company, you've got to create an environment which makes it welcoming of women and diversity. You've just got to, and that's a business necessity. It's not a nice to do, it's an absolute necessity. Yeah. But you can't bring women in and then have them leave, because that's more expensive and it creates a terrible, terrible impression of the company. So you've got to figure out how it's not in and out, but in and up. And therein lies the challenge. And the challenge is, within a company, we talk about diversity and inclusion. And I remember when Steve was CEO, he said, look, I've got to get a critical mass of women and minorities into the company, because if you don't have a critical mass of people, you can't institute any programs. So the first step, and the first 4 or 5 years, which were very painful, was actually scorecarding. Are we getting parity in hiring, parity in promotions? Are we watching who's leaving? So it was first scorecarding, getting the right critical mass into the company. Once you have the critical mass, how do you change behaviors in the company? Now, herein lies the challenge. You can do all the diversity training, you can do all the inclusion training, those are all necessary. But you can't do this training in isolation of watching how people behave in groups, how people behave when they're solving a problem. Because if you don't call people's behavior and say, look, that behavior was terrible, how you dealt with a woman or the diverse person, I think what happens is people say, yeah, I did the training because I had to do it, but then I can behave any which way I want.
Yeah.
And I think all these things have to be addressed by senior leaders, men or women, and by us women serving as sort of a network and a community of supporters for each other. Yeah. And in many cases, Judith, we have to become our own sisterhood also. Yeah. And I'll give you an example. I've talked about this many times. Sometimes we're in a presentation with men and women. The men are presenting, they do something terrible. The first break, the guys go to the restroom and they tell the guy, hey, Bill, your presentation was terrible. What the hell are you doing? He says, what did I do wrong? They talk, they get a little fist bump, they come back, and everything is fine, okay? Now let me contrast this. The woman does a bad job. Restroom, Judith, you did a terrible job. Stop making such a bitchy comment. It's got to stop. We have to be willing to take feedback from each other. We have got to be willing to trust each other that, feedback from another woman is constructive. And we have to learn to give it and take it. Yeah. And if we can accept each other as mentors, if we can accept each other as supporters, I think as a group, we will do better and move forward faster.
Yeah, I can agree with you more, although I'm slightly worried about going to the restroom after this now. But I think that's absolutely right, which is...
Safe zone.
Safe zone. Having the confidence to be able to take the feedback, we were talking about confidence later, and then letting it go and moving on is incredibly important as well as part of that. You mentioned Steve earlier and a need to embarrass him perhaps as we go through this, but I was just wondering about mentors for you, and I know you and Steve worked very closely together. Tell us a little bit about mentors and how they've helped you through your career and why you think it's important for other people now.
Yeah, I think that we have to be very careful on this issue of mentoring. Sometimes I get letters from people, will you be my mentor? People I've never heard of, people I've never met. I mean, let's understand what is a mentor. A mentor is supposed to be a wise and trusted advisor to you. You cannot be wise or trusted unless you know that person. Okay, you just can't be. And so I think it's very important that we understand what we mean when we say mentor. Okay? In many ways, mentors pick you, you don't pick them. Because mentors pick you because they like to hitch their wagon to you because they look good pushing you. And so you've got to always ask yourself the question, if you want somebody to mentor you, what are you going to do to move the ball forward significantly that the mentor feels like they want to be part of that ecosystem of yours? And I hope, Steve, I did okay by you that you chose to mentor me. Okay? Steve was my biggest mentor in so many ways. It wasn't always easy because you can't have somebody as a mentor and not listen to what they have to say. And if you're not going to listen to them, you better go back and tell them why you're not listening to them. Otherwise, mentors feel terribly left out. But I'm going to give you one other perspective on Steve. Steve was a professional mentor to me, but remember we talked about bringing your whole self to work? God knows I had my set of issues because I was working all the time and I had 2 little babies at home. And I had to balance 2 daughters and a traveling husband and everything. And there were times when I had to go to one school for one kid, deal with picking up another daughter in school. And Steve would say to me, fine, why don't you go to one school and I'll pick up the other daughter and bring her. This is the CEO of PepsiCo telling me this. Okay? Talk about a support system in PepsiCo. Doug? Sorry.
I think we're all wondering whether we should let Doug pick our kids up or not. I mean, that's...
I'm just imagining this bus It's okay, don't regret that you came here. I still love you. I still love you. But the fact of the matter is, Steve did an enormous amount for me. So he was not just my professional mentor, he was a personal support. And, a pain at sometimes because he gave me advice that was tough to take. I didn't like it, but I think I'm a better person today because of the fact that Steve invested so much in me. So I think it was not just Steve. There were other people. Mentors don't have to be your bosses alone. They can be people from all walks of life, people who give you advice that's sound, but they give you the advice because they care about you. They want you to move ahead. So when you see somebody mentoring you, take them seriously, nurture them, and make sure you respect them. Because if you don't, they're going to drop you.
Yeah. And I think that the thing about mentoring is you have to assume positive intent.
Absolutely.
The person is telling you that because they want you to get better. And I will tell you, and Steve, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but when I first came into International and I was working in the team there, you and I had a conversation about how a role fits together with a CEO role, and I had a strategy role at the time. And he talked about how much you'd helped him in that relationship as well. So I think one of the things about mentoring we all have to remember is it's a two-way thing. And it's really important on both sides that you build for that.
Absolutely.
You are clearly creating this environment and have created this environment in PepsiCo where you are trying to level the playing field for everybody within the organisation. As you think about sort of senior female leaders today, whether in Wal-mart or around the world, what can we do more of to help level that playing field? Because the next generation that's coming through, we want them to be even more successful than the generation that you've spoken about, the shift in from when you started to today.
I think the first thing we can do, first get the numbers in. It's critically important because most of the time the problem we have is that the pipeline looks skewed. We can't get people into senior positions unless the pipeline below them is robust. So we have to get the numbers in, and then we've got to retain them. So everything that we can do inside the company to provide support systems for women so that they can be a mom or a wife or a daughter and be an executive, we've got to do all of it because each of them are full-time jobs. And we're asking people to perform brilliantly at each job. And even if somebody's not asking us to do it, our DNA says we have to do it. That's how we are wired. So it's very, very difficult. But what can we do inside the company? As you get senior in the company, there's one tendency that we all have to watch against, which is when we're evaluating a woman, we're looking at what's wrong with the woman. Rather than, let's look at the record and really let's look at what she did right. Let's really look at it objectively. If there was no name of this person, whether it was a woman or a man, how would we evaluate this person? And I think this is the one thing we really have to check ourselves on because too often I'm finding that we tend to look for those derailers when it comes to evaluating women. And the more we push back and say, wait a minute, why didn't we do the same when evaluating other people? Why are we doing it for the women? I think we'll find ourselves pushing more women forward. Yeah. That's one. The second is, are we giving honest feedback to women earlier in the process? I think we do women a major disservice if we wait too late and then ding them in their performance when earlier on in the process we could have given them the right feedback, the right support, the right development projects to make them address some of the issues they may have had. So I think it's important that if we commit to having a certain number of women in senior positions, let's work the pipeline to pull them up, to give them a seat at the table, and make sure we're giving them the right and honest feedback to move forward. Because it's very simple. I'll take my business and your business. 85% of the shoppers in stores are women. Gatekeepers are women in grocery buying. So for both of us, women are a critical consumer base and an employee base. So we have to change internally to make sure the environment is right for them to survive and thrive. Yeah. And I think we have to keep exchanging best practices so that we can move this ball forward.
Yeah. And I think what everybody can take from that is whether you lead large teams, small teams, wherever you are in your career, giving that honest feedback to people early is really critically important. And I love this concept of we should really think about having facts when we make decisions about people and encouraging everybody to be able to do it and see it objectively as we bring people forwards. But just as we wrap up, let me ask you the one kind of key question in all of this, which is, what's the advice? What is the advice you would give to the women and the generation that are coming through to be successful in their careers?
You just had a session with Katie Kay, was it?
That's right.
Confidence. I think the first thing we all have to do as women is believe in ourselves. We are pretty damn good. Remember, well, even Chairman Mao said women hold up half the sky, okay? Many times it's more than half the sky. Yeah. We are important, so we have to have that confidence first. Because if we don't have confidence in ourselves, we start reflecting that uncertainty and lack of confidence in our workplace. We have to generate our own tailwinds first. Point number 2, I'd really put your hand up for difficult assignments. Sometimes when we take the safe assignments, we don't get noticed. So let's put our hand up for the difficult assignments, and let's get that out of the way as soon as possible so people know that you can get the difficult assignments done and you're a doer. Yeah. Third, in today's world, do a global assignment, please. The world is a gigantic place, gigantic place. You know, there's 7.5 billion people around the world. And if you can go out early in your career and do a global assignment, I think your resume is so rich and so marketable, even within the company. I think the sooner you do it, the better. And the last thing I tell you is a simple thing, besides all of the other stuff people have told you, invest in communication skills. You know, when I came to Yale to go to the business school, to graduate from the first year and go to the second year, you had to pass an oral and written communications course. In my life, I've never failed a course, and I failed that course. And me failing a communications course, I was an ace debater. How did that happen? I grew up in an environment where you lectured, you just sort of talked and everybody listened. And all of a sudden, you had to convince, you had to reach out to people, you had to show empathy. And I failed the course. That was the best thing that happened to me, Judith, because I had to relearn how to write logically, how to deliver messages in a compelling way. And I'd say that did wonders for me. Yeah. And I'd strongly encourage all women who aspire to move up, take a course in communications. You know, because the way you reflect your inner confidence is how you communicate, how you command the room, how you bring people along with you, and how you hold their attention. So invest in a great communications course, because at the end of the day, as you move up an organization, you're not a one-man or one-woman person. You're commanding large groups of people, and you have to effect change in any organization. So invest in communication skills. And if you did that, you know, besides being competent, et cetera, I think you'll do just fine.
Thank you. That's just great advice for everybody, and I think you've just given us an idea for what our next set of skill training should be as we progress through this journey. Indra, thank you very much indeed. You're clearly an inspiring leader in the way that you do this, and thank you for helping to level set that playing field for everybody. Everybody, Indra Nooyi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Thank you. Very, very pleasure.